Hey everyone, this is Car Ray Rob, where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob, and we want to welcome you to a brand new episode of Say Hello to My Little Film.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
That's right, everybody. We are back with another episode of Say Hello to My Little Film. Before we really get going here, Rob, do you want to tell everybody what we do here?
Absolutely. Here at Say Hello to My Little Film, Ray and I take turns recommending movies to the other that we love in the hopes of getting them to love them as much as we do.
That's right. We call it our fresh perspective on a retrospective review. I'm coming off a month where I liked the movie you showed me last month, but I didn't love it.
Yeah. No, I hit the wall. I've been pushing. I've been
Yeah,
pushing
you've been
for some
challenging
months.
me for a minute.
Exactly. So, I finally hit the wall. But I've decided I'm not going to keep pushing this month
Oh, thank
because
God.
it is Pride Month and it's time to celebrate. So I'm going to bring a movie that I do think you will enjoy.
Okay.
At least it definitely have the possibility to enjoy. I'm not going to push you too far out of your comfort zone, but it's a director that you...
Was it last year we did But I'm a Cheerleader?
It was last year.
I love that movie. That was super fun.
You did love But I'm a Cheerleader, which is great because this is another cult classic in that same vein.
Okay.
And it's by a director that you like. You love the movie that he is most known for.
This is a good
but
start.
you would not have. You've probably never heard of this movie, and I don't think as many people connect him with this movie as with that movie.
Interesting. Well, let's find out. Before I can find out if I'm even going to like the movie, I have to know what it is. So, Rob, tell me, what do you got?
What do you got? What do you got?
Well, Ray, what I got for you is a movie directed by the great Gus Van Sant.
Gus Van Sant.
Best
I've heard
known
his
for
name, but what is he?
Good Will Hunting.
Oh, yes.
Good Will
I'm
Hunting.
I'm
I
a
know
big
you're-
Will Hunter fan.
I knew you were a big Good Will Hunting fan. But one thing that I think that was kind of his. I don't want to call it a breakout because that's unfair. But I do feel like most people connect him with Good Will Hunting. But most people don't realize that how just big of a role Gus Van Sant played in the new queer cinema movement of the late '80s and the early '90s.
I don't.
And with great films like Melanoche, Drugstore Cowboy, and stuff like that, he really had made a lot of really great independent films in this kind of rising genre within cinema. But this movie is probably maybe his most well known from that era of filmmaking, and that is My Own Private Idaho.
I do not know this movie.
It stars the great and late River Phoenix.
Okay.
And one of his best performances, if not arguably his best performance, at least for some. And this is the first time I think this might be the first time I've ever done this. Same actor in the same year, and that is Keanu Reeves.
Another Keanu film. We started the year
film.
with him in January.
Exactly, with John Wick. And this is a much younger Keanu, a much
Sure.
different Keanu. But this movie is really great. It's kind of centers around a couple of street hustlers on the streets of Portland, and they are struggling to find their place in the world, especially River Phoenix's character, trying to find his mother, where he comes from. And as you can imagine, in this late '80s, early '90s era, in the LGBTQ community, finding your place in the world must have felt really hard.
That'd be almost impossible.
Exactly, coming off of still being very much into really the AIDS epidemic and things like that. So there's a lot of that in this movie. It is kind of loosely based on Shakespeare's Henry V and Henry IV. So there's a little bit of that in there as well, and kind of the dialogue and stuff like that. But it's a really great movie, a really great centerpiece of early '90s independent cinema. This is just a really good movie. Like I said, I think there might be elements that you may or may not glom onto, and that kind of, like I said, it's not a guarantee, but I do think there's a lot about this movie that you are going to enjoy.
I've not actually seen a ton of River Phoenix stuff, so I'm actually kind of interested to broaden my horizons there too.
Yeah. He the actor that was taken from us way too soon.
All right, well, let's check this out. Let's broaden those horizons, as I mentioned. If you guys haven't seen My Own Private Idaho ever or in a long time, take this opportunity to do so. Pause the podcast and then come back and see if I like this movie as much as Rob hopes I will.
Ray and Rob are currently watching the film. You may be also watching the film. If you're not, then you're listening to me say that Ray and Rob are watching the film. They'll be right back when they're done watching the film.
Ray, wake up.
Hmm?
Ray.
What? Where are we? Here we are.
Wake up.
We're doing a podcast.
We're doing a podcast.
I was sleeping because I have
noticed.
narcolepsy, not because I was bored or anything like that.
Well, that's good.
I don't want any negative connotations.
You weren't bored. That's good. I'm glad I didn't bore you to death with this movie.
No. But narcolepsy kicked in. I didn't have anything.
That would be a terrible thing to have.
That would suck.
It would suck.
It's very helpless.
Yeah.
I've never seen narcolepsy really portrayed like this in a movie.
Yeah, no, I agree with that.
Usually
I think
for comedy.
mostly for comedy. I can't. Do you remember there was a movie that like the girlfriend had narcolepsy and they went bowling and she like fell asleep when she was throwing the bowling ball and got like thrown out onto the lane. Do you know what that movie is? Does anybody know what that movie is? If anybody knows what that movie is, comment below because man, I am now drawing a blank. It's like Stuck on You. It feels like a Fairley Brothers movie or something like that.
I keep thinking of the Yawning Prince and Spaceballs right now. Like he has to have narcolepsy of some sort, a very small degree.
That's true. That's fair.
But it is used interestingly here.
There's a lot of metaphor, I feel like, with the narcolepsy.
I definitely feel there's like a helplessness metaphor that just revolves around Mike's character, River Phoenix's character.
Yeah, no, I agree, and it's almost like I mean, Scott even says at one point like it's brought on by stress. So I do think it's like an avoidance thing, possibly.
Yeah,
subconsciously,
a little bit
subconscious, exactly.
Yeah.
Where stressful situations, it's like it's his way of dealing with it, and just kind of like letting the world. Yeah, while he sits the next few plays
takes this
out.
one out. Yeah. For me, I kind of had this like kind of reminded me of like Memento at like feeling wise, like when because they would use it as like a transition too as narcolepsy.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you just kind of wake up in a new scene, and you kind of have to like as a viewer get caught up like where are we? What's going on? Like just like Mike is the character.
Yeah.
Like, he's trying to figure it out, and he's the scene is happening around him, and he's got to. He's got to figure out where he is, how he got here, and what is he supposed to be doing. I feel like, as a viewer, we're kind of doing that same thing.
Absolutely. And almost like, he falls asleep in Portland, wakes up in Seattle. It's like you said, like a transition from one place to another. But there is that helplessness and that reliance on Scott.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that is built into their relationship, which is obviously what, as this movie progresses and things, deteriorate in certain ways or just change, it hits harder.
Right.
Because when he is on his own, it's hard because he just falls asleep in the middle of the road. You know what I mean, or something like that.
Right.
And then it's who's there to protect him, who's there to save him, and it's those moments hit pretty hard because of that.
I will say that's what I was expecting to happen. I thought like the end of this movie was going to be like he's got this helplessness to him, and something really, really bad is going to happen when he falls asleep and he doesn't have somebody around him to save him or protect him.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought like that was going to maybe kind of be the lesson to be learned, but it didn't really happen. He gets pickpocketed.
Yeah.
But a couple minutes later, somebody else the end of the movie is somebody that does kind of save him. I'm assuming maybe this guy was actually picking him up, throwing him in his car, and going to do horrible things to him.
Do horrible things to him, bury him.
Felt like the guy had good intentions.
Well, and that's fair, but I think that that's also a certain element of life to that, where it's like because there's a lot of talk of the road.
Mm-hmm.
He talks. Right. He opens up the movie with a monologue about the road, exactly, and he talks about like how he always knows where I am by the look of the road.
Yeah.
So I think that that's obviously a pretty obvious metaphor for life. Just in general, road is a pretty obvious metaphor
thing,
for right. The symbolism, and I think that you're right. But I think with that ending, it does harken to that, where it's like good things and bad things happen in life.
Yeah,
you just kind of have to keep going. But obviously, with Mike, there's a lot of bad, and we're with him for a lot of bad
Yeah.
as he's kind of on this journey um, along the road. And I think one thing that I take away from this movie, beyond just like some of like the the great symbolism, and this I guess kind of folds into that as well, is some of the visuals. And I think going along with the narcolepsy, with the time passage and stuff like that, is the time lapse photography element of it.
Sure.
Because I kind of feel like he did that very purposefully. He put those images, attached them to the narcolepsy element, because it's like the clouds are passing him by. Like there's the
Right.
stationary house or whatever, the hillside, and then there's like really beautiful clouds moving through the air. And I think that that's kind of how Mike is, where especially in those moments of narcolepsy, he is very stationary and everything's happening around him.
Yeah.
So it is kind of I think a great visual metaphor that really kind of works with the narcolepsy.
Yeah, one thing I didn't get was when he called the road an ugly face. I'm like, it felt to me like one of those picture books where you're supposed to like look at it and like you see the 3D image pop up, but I've never been able to do that.
You didn't see the two little eyes?
Nah, and
with
I
the
saw
trees?
two trees. I'm like, I see the eyes, but I don't really see a mouth. I guess is the road a tongue? I don't know. That was distracting to me, but no, yeah, I think the movie. I think also the way he shot the sex scenes was kind of interesting.
Oh,
where
definitely.
It wasn't still photography because they were like
You could tell they were
moving, but it was like
quivered,
holding,
yeah.
like nobody was moving, like purposefully moving,
Yeah.
but hold on the shot like for 2 seconds, then the next one. So it almost looked like you were just rifling through a quick montage of static scenes, but you weren't.
Right.
So it's interesting.
Well, yeah, and I'm sure at least some of that was for maybe a kind of a ratings issue.
Sure,
You know what I
yeah.
mean, keeping it like that. But I do think it almost kind of makes it almost like a painting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's like, and kind of allow when you're painting a still life. When you go to a class or something like that, and you have a model or whatever, and they
Yeah.
have to stay completely still. So I feel like there's a little bit of that in there as
Yeah.
well, almost like a stylization. But a lot of this movie is stylized,
Sure.
and I think that is just a layer of that.
One thing we kind of talked about, Mike, and you were kind of mentioning like as the clouds pass him by, and I kind of feel like so much of this movie is like, Mike is stuck in this lifestyle, where he's turning tricks and kind of homeless.
Yeah.
Pretty much
Well,
homeless.
pretty much homeless, I would say. Definitely.
Familyless. Nobody really to depend on. Just
Mhm.
and helpless in some ways because of his narcolepsy and stuff, and kind of feels like a character that doesn't really see the way out, and
Yeah.
like this is just how it is. And I don't know if he's really working to find a way out,
Yeah.
other than maybe trying to find his mom was a step in that direction. I'm not sure.
Maybe not even necessarily as a way to get out of the life, because I don't even know if that is what it is per se, but I do think, as we kind of said in the beginning, a lot of this movie is about community and finding where you belong. And I think they do a really good job of kind of setting up this community that he is a part of. This group of hustlers, Scott obviously being at the forefront of that for him, but also, the others in his group, and the hotel, where Bob Pigeon is.
Right.
And like this almost like Lost Boys, Lord of the Flies situation, where it's like they're all kind of living there. Now, granted, it does seem like Bob is kind of the patriarch of it, and I guess the old lady who's also there is
Yeah.
kind of the matriarch in a sense. But I think that they are selling you as a viewer that he has this community, and it's kind of whimsical, because this is also where the Shakespeare element of it comes in. And I think that this is kind of a going back to the stylization of it, the dialogue here is probably the most Shakespeare that it is in the whole movie. Or in these scenes. And I think that's to lure you into kind of like feeling like, okay, like this is an interesting group of people. Like this is, while there might not necessarily be doing things that you feel like are good and on the up and up, like you root for them. But then you do kind of see the cracks, as the movie goes on, especially between Scott and Mike specifically, because they are the focus of the movie.
Right,
You know
for
what I
sure.
mean? Like it is those two. But, so that is one question I wanted to ask, with this movie being the way that it is. I hesitated mentioning it before because I didn't want to give you some kind of unjust expectations, because, I thought about mentioning something like Baz Luhrmann's Romeo and Juliet, which is a modern movie where they use Shakespearean dialogue.
Yeah.
Now, this movie is a modern movie, but while they're not doing actual Shakespeare dialogue,
Right.
it is modern dialogue done in a Shakespearean style. Now,
In some scene.
in some exactly,
Yeah.
and when we're talking about Bob and the hotel and
Right.
like that area specifically, as I feel like where, like I said, that scenario is where this dialogue really comes out. But I could see that possibly being distracting. What did you think?
It caught my attention.
Okay.
I don't know if I thought it was distracting. I think at first I was, as you watch the movie for the first time, I'm like, is this how Scott talks? Was he talking like this earlier? Or am I just
Right.
noticing it now? Or is this just how Bob talks kind of thing?
Mhm.
And then, then I'm like, oh, this is Shakespeare. Okay. It's like, it's a modernized like version, but it's like, there's a Shakespearean rhythm to this. I'm like,
Right.
all right, I'm getting this now. I think when you look back at the movie, you're able to kind of figure out all in all, like what they were trying to pull off.
Yeah.
But I don't think I found it distracting. But I slowly, I think, figured out like what was occurring and how it was, how it was being used.
Yeah. I think it's fascinating the way that they do it. I think it's done so well, especially because being a loose adaptation of Henry IV, it's not
Mhm.
like Gus Van Sant just lifted dialogue
Right.
from Henry IV and said, okay, I'm putting it in this movie. He made modern dialogue in the Shakespearean cadence. And I think that it worked really well. I love it. I really do. That's, again, one of the things I do love about this movie, because it does kind of give it that kind of like boisterous, joyous kind of sense of community. Even in some of like the times of strife, like when Mike and Scott have the side deal or side plan to steal the money, and where's Bob? He's
Right.
going to do the whole plot to steal from the rock and rollers and all of that.
Yeah.
But then so you have that whole scene, all that, and it all feels so Shakespearean.
Yeah.
Like something you would see on a Shakespearean play.
Yeah.
It's so great. And then and then it has that the big, I guess the biggest scene of this, where they get Bob to kind of lie about the situation. And I love that scene so much, because like I feel like there's so much mythology of this group wrapped up in this scene, and like, but also like some of the ways that Scott, I think, always kind of is looking down his nose at this entire group of people.
Yeah, that's definitely something I would want. I would want to talk about. We have to explore Keanu Reeves' character, but I will say I don't know if I feel like maybe a little uneven the movie with like the Shakespearean stuff isn't there a ton.
Right.
Like the movie kind of it shifts that focus when they're all together to that. Then when Bob's gone for a long stretch of the middle of like that second act or whatever, that's disappears. And I almost kind of feel like I like the momentum of the movie or the pace of the movie more when they were doing that. Like you said, when there was that sense of community. Because the movie then like kind of departs for a little bit to like a buddy road trip movie for a minute.
Yeah.
And it feels different, as they're like hunting down kind of clues about trying to figure out where to go next and stuff.
Right.
But I did want to talk about Scott, because I do feel like he's got he's a really interesting character too, because to me I kind of feel like he's just pretending, like Mike is the one who's stuck in this lifestyle.
Yeah.
And Scott's just visiting.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's just like voyeuristically watching, and
Yeah.
he's participating, but like he's not stuck. Like kind of has this feeling where he can leave whenever he wants.
Yeah.
He almost kind of says like, yeah, as soon as my dad dies, I'm going to go back to my good life, or not. Maybe it wasn't when his dad dies, but
it was on his 21st birthday.
Yeah, 21st birthday, which was in
he
a
was
week.
gonna get
Yeah,
his
you're right.
inheritance. Yep.
He's gonna get his inheritance, and then he'll go back to being good. His parents will be happy about it,
Right.
and it'll be great. And that's kind of what happens, or it wasn't necessarily on his birthday, but it was like when he wanted to get out because he fell in love with Carmela, the girl he meets in Italy. He's done, and he just says bye to Mike, and he pulls himself out. And it's interesting because I'm like, is Scott an antagonist in this movie a little bit?
I think so. I think maybe that's we don't always have a question, but are we?
Oh,
usually have a question. It's to be a loose question. Is Scott actually the antagonist of this movie?
Yeah, is he the bad guy?
You know what I mean? Because I think there's a lot to be said about that. Well, let's talk a little bit about that. But yeah, I think I can totally see where you're coming from, especially when it's like he does. Like I said, he always kind of seems to have this. Kind of looking down the length of his nose at all of these people, and
it's like he's dumpster diving. He's just doing it for fun.
Yeah, Yeah, and I think the way he kind of makes fun of Bob. I feel like the rest of the group do truly idolize Bob, and I
Yeah.
think maybe Scott does to a certain degree as well. But I think it's more as a gateway to the behaviors that his father doesn't approve of. You
Right,
know what I mean?
right.
He sees Bob as that, like a mentor of that, but not. And even says, later in the movie, when he shuns Bob at the restaurant. I love you more than my father who I just buried.
Right.
So I do think there is a bit of conflict with inside Scott, because I do think that while he is, like you said, kind of dumpster diving, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? I do think slumming, if
Yeah,
you will.
sure.
I do think he does appreciate the community, but I think he can do
Yeah.
it so freely because he knows he has that net of safety.
Right.
And I think that's kind of the thing that makes it, like you said, different for
Yeah.
him than any of
It's
the
like
other boys young men in this situation.
Yeah, it's kind of like he's like a National Geographic documentary. Like he's
Right.
living with monkeys, but he's not a monkey, and he could get really attached to the gorillas, and he was going to want you to save the gorillas, but eventually he's going to go home and not going to be a gorilla anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And what if the gorillas end up passing away when he's not there? It's like, well, I did that. That was a time I did, but I'm not doing that anymore.
Right.
I'm on to leopards now, or whatever. You know, what I mean? It just keeps
Sure.
stretching the metaphor.
Yeah.
But I think there is this really interesting dynamic between Scott and Mike when you think about it like that. Because I even think of like that scene where like they're in Hans's apartment
Mhm.
and Hans is like dancing with the lamp and
Yeah.
lip singing. It's like really awkward, and like Mike seems like he's about to go into one of those another narcoleptic fits
Right.
because Mike is just stuck watching this because he needs this guy to do his thing. He needs this guy to pay him. Like that's how Mike survives, and he has to deal with this. But like Scott just gets up and turns the music off, and like, no, we're done now.
Right.
So Scott can always just get out of this situation, but Mike can't. He's always stuck in it.
Yeah, there is a sense of control, and I think that that's also part of it as well. Is there's I think Mike feels a trust with Scott because there is that sense of control in
Yeah.
his life, and I think Mike does look up to Scott, and that could probably be part of the reason why he falls in love with Scott.
Yeah. Or thinks he does.
Or thinks he does, is because he seems to have it. I'm not going to say all together, but at least has control enough to,
Yeah.
Again, keep things together when he needs to.
Right.
And I think that especially in the scene where it kind of culminates by the fire, and Mike confesses his love to Scott, that he loves him, and Scott kind of rebuffs him. Really, says like, oh, I'm only basically I'm gay for pay. You know what I
Right.
mean? I don't think two guys can even be in love, which, again, it feels very awkward and weird. And I think
But it is honest, and Scott's.
It is. Well, I think it's honest for Scott.
Yeah.
But okay, maybe the first part is, but I think the second part might not be. I think that is Scott not necessarily conforming to the life. That's his father talking, maybe is what I should say. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
that's his father talking. And it's like, that's how he's able to kind of keep that wall so that he knows he can go back to the money when he
Yeah.
needs to. You know what I mean? By
Yeah.
convincing himself that he can't fall in love with anybody, whether it be Mike or Bob or whoever, that he's always going to be able to go back to that money because he keeps that wall there, that that safety rail in place. I don't know. That could be just me, but obviously, ultimately, that's what happens no matter what. Whether it's his truth or not, it is what happens. Is that he does go. He finds Carmela when they go to Rome, and he basically leaves that life behind. So
Yeah.
you know,
He falls in love with
Right.
a woman, but
Right.
yeah, it's an interesting point you make that is he telling himself that, or does he actually believe it? And it's hard to say. I think if you believe, or if you're kind of believing your standpoint, you don't necessarily have to view him as an antagonist, because it's not that he's I guess saying it the other way around is more, this guy is an antagonist. It's a little bit more pessimistic view of Scott.
yeah,
But I think that's where I lie. I think I'm more pessimistic towards Scott all in all, even
I can
which I
understand.
think
Yeah,
is
I get
interesting.
that.
Yeah, but it's interesting because he is a protector of
Right,
Mike in so many
right.
tons of ways. But a scene where he's not a protector is like when they get to Idaho, like the only scene of this movie that takes place in Idaho, I think, other
Oh,
than like
sure.
on the roads. But like when they visit Mike's brother or
Yeah.
dad.
Right, which we'll get to that.
I'm still not sure where I fell on that. I
Yeah.
have to like rewatch that scene just to like
Yeah.
see like, all right, who's telling the truth? Where's the? I have to listen to I think the brother's story again to like
Right.
see the metaphor in there. Maybe you can explain what I may have missed upon our first viewing. But when Scott walks away, Mike and his brother get physical,
Yeah.
and like Scott has no inclination to go help him. Like,
Right.
and I kind of feel like that's Scott. Like he's like, I just watch what's going on in this lifestyle. I don't participate. I participate when I want to in this
Right.
lifestyle, and that's how he's like the opposite of Mike, where Mike is stuck in these situations. Like I said, where Mike has to watch Hans dance, but Scott doesn't. He can just turn the music off and say like, we're moving on.
Right.
And then like Mike has to deal with his brother's abuse or whatever it is, but Scott's like, man, I'm just gonna hang out in the bathroom and look at pictures. You know what I mean? Like to me, like I just think that's their juxtaposition to each other.
I think there's definitely some truth to that. I think the other part of it too is the interaction with Mike's brother father. Is that Brodad is that it's a familial issue. Like it's not so much about the lifestyle at that point. It is about like the true life journey, and I think that's something that while I think Scott is willing to help Mike with to a pretty hefty extent. They go to Rome together, you know what I mean, to try to find his mom. I do think it is, again, he keeps everything at arm's length. So in that moment, it's too close to the sun. You know what I mean? And he's just like, I don't want to deal with that. So you deal with that, you figure it out, and you guys have to hash that out. I can't have anything to do with that. I can't have a part of it.
I don't know if I see that struggle in his face though.
I don't necessarily I mean, I don't. Yeah, I mean that's fine. Like I'm not saying I disagree with you in that regard. I'm just saying like it could be that extra added layer of it is that he's just like I can't be a part of that.
Right.
You know what I mean? And I think that's
I have to keep
his
that
own way
up.
for safety. Right. And I think that's absolutely right. And it's funny because he is such a magnetic character. We mentioned earlier the scene. The Shakespearean scene with Bob, where they have Bob regale the story and basically lie, and Keanu's calling him out the whole time. You know what I mean? Scott's calling him out, and it's kind of making fun of him and poking fun of him, and you can see like how Mike is attracted to him in that moment because he then again kind of goes to that idea of control, and I think that's something that people, especially broken people,
right?
They search for that. They search for a strong person who seems to have it together. And I know something I didn't mention that I meant to mention about the fire scene, where he confesses his love for Scott, is talking about their upbringing and how like, if I had a normal dad or whatever, maybe I wouldn't be who I am or where I am today. And it basically comparing their lives and why Scott is able to have those abilities to be in control or be that kind of charismatic person or whatever. And I think that is again something that is kind of the folly of Mike,
right?
Is as he's searching for community, he finds these people who unfortunately in the end abandon him. And I think that's kind of, it's sad, what I mean? That's kind of the ballad of Mike, is that he has abandonment issues and people keep abandoning him.
Right. Yeah. He's in a cycle that he can't get out of.
Yeah.
And it kind of feels like this narcolepsy will never let him get out of that, because the next person that saves him and helps him, he's going to get an attachment to, but they're probably not going to be all in either, and could possibly end up abandoned once again. You just never,
right.
It could just be a vicious cycle that won't stop.
Another element of this movie that made me kind of on the fence about whether you would or wouldn't like it is, so this is very much a journey, like a movie about a journey. Mike, Mike's journey specifically with Scott aiding him, but it kind of shirks Hollywood convention in a lot of ways, where it feels like it might be building to certain reveals or certain moments. And you intimated that just a minute ago when you were talking about Mike's Brodad, where it was like, is this story real? Like, did his mom kill him, his actual father, or is the brother his actual father?
Right.
And you never find out.
No.
So those things are kind of left
But we
up
know
to
what
you.
Mike thinks.
Right, we know what Mike thinks, and that's kind of that's kind of, I guess, where I'm going is Mike thinks that. So then you as a viewer either agree with Mike or disagree with Mike.
Yeah.
And so there's not, while there's truth in the movie, there's not a lot of concrete truth.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's like, how does that work for you as a viewer when you, I know specifically, very much like, weakness and need,
Right.
Building to specific moments and things like that, choices, hard choices, whatever,
Yeah.
to be made. How does a movie like this sit with you in that regard?
I think it makes me think. I have to think about how I like that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? I guess for me, like I don't mind that there's kind of these two stories circling around Mike's head, maybe about who's his dad or who was his dad. I like that they can kind of leave that up to you. I wish maybe there would be. I guess where I was thinking the movie would go is because the movie is like then turns into like Finding Mom.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, like another kind of subverting the audience, I guess. But like they don't really ever find her, and then they kind of just quit trying.
Sure.
After they go to Italy and she's not there, because I was expecting like, all right, we'll find mom, she'll confess about dad, and then there will be some
You'll
kind
get
of
the closure.
there'll be some kind of closure for Mike about who he is,
Mm-hmm.
and like maybe once he understands himself better, he'll be able to find a way out of the situation.
Right.
Or like even if he doesn't get out of it by the end of the movie, there'll be a light at the end of the tunnel.
Right.
But it's the opposite. Like they don't find mom. They have to stop looking because Scott's not interested anymore.
Right, he's basically lost interest.
And then Mike has no support, and then we're kind of back where he has to. As soon as he gets back to the States, he's got to start turning tricks again, and he's just right back stuck into the cycle he was. And that's very real.
Yeah.
Where like you're not, people in the real world are not able to just escape, their bad. It's not even bad choices, but the bad situations that they're stuck in. However you view bad, But it does subvert your expectation of where this movie's going to try to get you to.
Yeah. Well, I think it's very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
That after they get back, that's when Bob dies. So we have the scene where Bob sees Scott and Carmela and his new life now.
Yeah.
And he follows him into the restaurant, tries to reconnect with him, and Scott basically tells him to take a hike.
Right.
And that night, Bob dies, seemingly from a broken heart.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think it's very intentional that Scott is burying his father on one part of the cemetery.
Right.
And then in the other part of the cemetery, they're having their memorial for Bob. And Scott's forced to kind of watch that.
Yeah.
Which kind of, again, goes back to what I said earlier about his, at least somewhat of a love connection to that community, because he's not paying attention to what's going on with his father's memorial at that point. He's basically watching what's happening at the other one, and kind of sees Mike. They lock eyes, you can tell, and he kind of like kind of taunts him a little bit maybe. But I think for Mike specifically, at that point, Bob was a father figure. Not knowing who his true father was, whether it was the bro dad or the guy that was shot by his mom or whatever.
Right. Neither of them raised him.
Right. Neither of them raised him, so it didn't matter necessarily. In this moment, the closest thing he had to a father figure was dead, and he was mourning him with the community that he was in. And I think at that point, Scott felt like he was on the outside, which I think is actually pretty powerful in that moment, where it's like, it's almost like you could see it in Scott's mind a little bit. Like, I wish I were there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There is part of me that still wishes that I were there, but here I am locked in this quote unquote straight normal life. And, all of this kind of joyous raucousness is going on, on this other part of the cemetery.
Yeah, for sure. I think I definitely played into, the way I look at this scene is very similar, but it, kind of stuff like Scott was doing that voyeur thing again, where he's watching it, but not.
Yeah.
But this time he's not participating by choice. And I do think you kind of think like, does he want to dip his toe back in? Is he really happy over here or not? And again, I think that's something that's a little bit left up to the viewer. But he doesn't get pulled back in, because there's even the scene before that, like I think before Bob dies, before he goes into the restaurant, where it kind of seems like he's, Scott's in his limo and he sees Mike just sleeping on the side of the road.
Yeah.
That, looking as homeless as he ever has, and he just drives on by and doesn't think about stopping it or anything like that. Just kind of like gets to wherever they're supposed to be going.
Yeah, and I think that that's true. And like I said, I think that I'm not saying that these moments are necessarily apparent in the movie, but I do think that that is something that you can, possibly as a viewer can gleam onto things or
For
put
sure.
onto things, is that it is how Scott has put this wall up now.
Right.
You know what I mean? That he
I
doesn't
agree.
care about Mike anymore, and that maybe he is in love with Mike, but he can't let himself be in love with Mike because this life that he now has, that he's supposed to be going to, wouldn't allow for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's also part of, as we've kind of talked about in the before section about this era of the LGBTQ community and kind of the world that they were living in and the lack of acceptance that they had. I think that that is an underlying thing. And like I said, I'm not saying it's overt, but I do think it, as a viewer, as I said, there's not a lot of concrete truth. So I think it's up to the viewer in certain regards to put things, onto this story.
Yeah.
I do think that that is an element of this that exists.
I find that to be really interesting in that, like, I feel like we see Scott the same way, but we see him on different ends of the spectrum, and I think that's really cool. Like, in a way, that you, as a viewer, you're allowed to do that. Because I just feel like would I say Mike? I meant Scott. Sorry. I feel like we see Scott the same way, but I think we're on different ends of the spectrum. Because I just feel like I see Scott more pessimistically. I feel like I take what he's saying.
He's a glass half empty for you.
I think like I'm taking like what he's saying at face value, and maybe that's too shallow of me. But that's just like the character that I see on screen, and maybe I'm just trying not to like him and stuff, and so I'm projecting too.
Sure.
But I still feel the same thing. I still feel like there's walls. I just feel like he's on the other side of it,
right?
Where he's almost trying to distance himself from them because he just doesn't want to. He's just done with that part of his life, and he doesn't want to go over there again, and he's just done with it. Where you see it as more, I think, like he's doing it for the money, and like it's not necessarily where his heart is. Maybe his heart's on the other side of the wall,
right?
But
I think, like I said, I think that the wall, the charisma that he kind of portrays through the whole movie, and even like the caring control, is again kind of a defense mechanism in some ways. So it's like in this moment, he's using it as a weapon against Mike and that part of himself. So I mean, I think it's all somewhat true.
That's what I'm saying.
Know what I
That's
mean?
what I feel like.
Yeah, it's all somewhat.
I feel
true.
like it's in the middle, and it's in the middle, but we're like you can view Mike two different ways. I feel like we kind of do. Like you see the better side of him, and I see the worst side of him. I think.
Sure.
Which is like I said, I think that's a great that you could do that that the viewer has the choice to do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's not just spilled with exposition exactly what Scott's thinking.
Right.
It lets you personify him a little bit yourself.
Yeah. So as I kind of mentioned, this is a kind of a big landmark film in the new queer cinema era.
I will say I'm surprised by that a little bit.
Oh, really?
Yeah, because I didn't feel like the movie was that like I don't know what the right term is, but like that gay. Honestly.
Well, okay. So this is all right. So this is amazing, kind of that you point that out. So yes, for now, like in 2026, this seems like really tame. But in 1991, to have a Hollywood studio semi-financed movie where it opens up with a man, River Phoenix getting fellatio from another man, probably hit a lot different.
Yeah, but I mean, at that point in the movie, though, I didn't necessarily know if Mike was queer or not, you know what I mean? Or if it was just like, or if he was also like a gay for pay situation.
Right.
So,
but either way,
yeah.
But either way, you know what I mean? And I think of something like Midnight Cowboy, which was rated X upon release because of things like that.
Yeah.
But that was a very island onto itself.
Sure.
At that time, this was part of a movement. So I think that's where this was. While that was a thing that existed, like, and I'm not to take anything away from Midnight Cowboy, like this was a wave that was coming. You know what I mean? And I think that that's something that is a big part of this. And while I understand, yes, like it doesn't necessarily, it's not overt. It's not Queer Eye or something
Yeah,
like that,
yeah.
or the L Word,
Yeah.
or Queer as Folk or anything like that. I think and all of these landmark things that have come along, these pieces that have come along in the 40, 30 years that this is
Yeah.
that since this existed, excuse me.
35.
And right, and but to be kind of not the first, but amongst the first, that
Sure.
were kind of the start of the wave.
Yeah, I see
You
that.
started small, you know
Right,
what I
right,
mean?
right.
Even something the movie you hated, Pink Flamingos. You know what I mean? That's a movie that didn't necessarily shirk away from its taboo.
Right.
And while that was way more in your face,
Yeah, way more.
this is still, at least in some regards, has that same kind of bravery, I guess.
And I think we've talked about, like, it's hard to judge a movie presently, because culturally we are in a different spot. Not that we
Right.
aren't reverting,
Right.
but like,
No,
so
unfortunately, in certain ways we are.
yeah, but it's hard for me to, like, put myself, like, what did somebody in 1991 think about it? Because to me, it's like it's very passive.
Right.
And I think that's a good thing overall.
Right. No,
And
I don't think you're wrong.
Yeah.
I think it's a perfectly acceptable thing to understand. Because again, if you had been watching this in 1991, you might have felt different. You know what I mean? Because it's just like, that's not something you saw every day.
Sure.
You know what I mean? That's not necessarily something that you were exposed to.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that
And
it
also,
says that
yeah.
it just shows that representation matters. I
Right.
guess is my point. You know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Oh, yeah,
I think
for
there's
sure,
a lot of
for
that
sure.
where it's like, stop showing me this because of X,
Right.
Y, and Z, whatever reason. Like, representation doesn't matter. Having this in something as you
Right.
see doesn't matter. It shows that this actually it totally matters.
Yeah.
Because something like this that was
Normalizes
like
it.
such a a big deal in 1991, you seeing it now in 2026, you're like, that's fine.
Yeah,
You know what I
I'd show
mean?
a little
That's
kid
normal.
this movie; it'd be fine.
Well, I don't know about that, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But still,
No, and it also, I think, the way they shoot the sex scenes too.
Right.
Because they're so, like, still.
right?
Like, there's
right.
nothing like I don't know, for lack of a better word, hardcore
right
necessarily
right.
about that.
No,
It's not even softcore. It's just like, it almost looks like you're looking at pictures,
It's
like we
art.
mentioned. Yeah,
It's
it's
art.
artistic, exactly. And I guess that probably says a lot too.
Yeah.
But
I mean, I think that's Van Sant or Gus Van Sant's style at this time as well, which I think is really great, because I know you haven't seen Drugstore Cowboy, but Drugstore Cowboy does some very interesting things stylistically as well. I think this one is more stylized than Drugstore Cowboy, but I think it's great, and I think it's what makes it memorable. I think its color palette is great. I think that the shot design is amazing. Like I said, stuff with like the time lapse photography elements and
Yeah.
things like that, and even the way that he kind of frames and blocks performances, I think is just absolutely stunning. I mean, obviously with the stuff with Bob and the community, like the hustler community, all the stuff in the hotel is just blocked masterfully. And he's able to kind of get so much done in such a short amount of time, and you really immerse yourself in the group,
Yeah.
which I think is what really works, and it's kinetic, and it's great. It's so good.
there's definitely a street level feel to it too.
Yeah.
Like I said, I guess I don't remember if we said this, but like a big the movie at times feels like documentary to me.
Right.
You
did mention that. Yep.
Yeah, where it's like, there's the talking heads and all that kind of stuff, kind of describing life or situations that they've been in, like the surrounding tricksters.
Mm-hmm.
But there's a realness there, or it doesn't feel Hollywoodized.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And like I said, I think it all kind of just lends to this idea that life is a road, and all of it is used for symbolism, and I think it all kind of plays well. This kind of interplay of characters that come in and out of the story, like Hans.
Mm-hmm.
I think it just kind of goes to show like how life, how small of a world it can feel like sometimes.
Sure.
You see Hans in one place, and then all of a sudden he pops up in another, and but then Mike can't find his mom. You know what I
Right,
mean? So
right.
it's like simultaneously the world feels so small, and you run into these people constantly over and over and over again in all these different places. Yet he'll travel halfway across the world and still can't find his mom.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of I guess, just really brilliant, beautiful emotion in that. It's both really great and also extremely devastating.
Yeah. That's a pre-Facebook world, though. I'm like, you can
It
probably
is.
find her pretty easily now.
Well, that's fair. That's true.
Yeah. I thought that, one really interesting line, and I don't know if it meant too much, but like, when I think when Mike was kind of getting desperate, there in Italy, and he couldn't find her, he's having those kind of flashbacks. And what was he referring to? The house. He's saying about their house. He's like, the house
whether
was
it was
blue.
or
It's like,
no,
oh wait,
no,
it's
green.
green. How could
Yeah.
I not remember that? And I just
Yeah.
love that idea because our memories are not reliable.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like our memories are. If you're going to rely solely on your memory for certain situations, you're going to be wrong a lot. You can be influenced so easily to, romanticize something or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, I don't know if that really went anywhere, but it's this thing about Mike's childhood that was like, what is it? How did it? Is that what messed him up? Was it more fine, but he just can't remember the good parts, or
Right.
why is he not, quote unquote, kind of in his words, normal?
Yeah. Well, another element of the narcolepsy that I do think is interesting is that I could see it being used as a way for him. I said earlier, kind of as like a way to escape the moment and all of that, but it's also a way to maybe a way for him to escape home, because every time he has these narcoleptic episodes, he sees his mom.
Yeah.
Or his house or whatever, these memories from when he was a child, and I feel like it's a way for him to escape back to in his mind when things were better, when things were good, and you call it a throwaway, but I don't because I think what that kind of means for me is that some of that stuff is starting to slip away.
Sure.
You know what I
Sure.
mean? And he can't
As
remember.
he's more and more stuck in this cycle that he's in.
Exactly. Kind of getting farther and farther away from it. Because, he goes halfway around the world and he still can't find his mom. And by the end of the movie, he still doesn't find his mom. He still doesn't find where he's supposed to be. And it is kind of a failure. It's kind of an unhappy ending because of that. Because Mike still doesn't seem to, or it doesn't seem to have a direction per se.
Right.
But he's on the road. And he's always going to be on the road. And I think that that's kind of what the ending is really kind of trying to signify, is that he's moving further away from this childhood that he can't remember, that he kind of, lies to himself about or doesn't or whatever, again, however you want to look at it. But that's real. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Like, it's a real thing that we all kind of deal with. This is not a Hollywood ending.
Right.
Where, I find my mother, and it's like either A, you can reform a relationship with her because she's sorry for everything that happened, and you find out who your dad was, and it's not your brother, hope to God, but or whatever. But like, or
who's only a couple years older,
right? Like not that much older, or she doesn't want to see him, and it blows up immediately, but at least it's closure of some kind.
Right.
He knows where she is, he knows what the score is, and he can move on with his life. The end of this movie has neither one of those things.
Right.
So I think that it's a gamble, but I think that's also part of independent cinema in the 80s and into the 90s, is there were a lot of risks that I just don't think are taken now. Though I will say the ambiguous ending is a more common thing in independent cinema still, like to this day, maybe even a lot more. I don't know, but
writing struggles.
Right, and I think that it's almost become a cliche to a certain degree, where it's like an ambiguous ending does not replace a good ending.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's like, I don't know what to do, just leave it ambiguous and people will figure out what it is. Like,
right. Let people project what they want.
I think it needs to work, but for me, My Own Private Idaho as an ending works. Well, we didn't really start with a question, but we kind of found one.
Yeah.
As we were talking about.
Yeah, very naturally.
Yeah, quite naturally, which maybe sometimes is the best way to find them.
Sure.
And that is Scott actually the antagonist of this movie? And I it's funny because I do feel like we kind of have this conversation a little bit, but I want to know where exactly you land on that.
Yeah, I think it's tough. You made a lot of great points about where Scott's head could be at in the movie, but I think, to me, I don't know. I think life's the antagonist, But since Scott has it so good at the end, I think he is the antagonist to me. And I think it's a
shake your fist at him, you son of a.
I think it's I think it makes his character more interesting to me if he is the antagonist. You know what I mean? Because it's like I don't know if he has the purest heart in all these situations that he goes into.
Sure.
Like I said, if you look at him like I look at him as just like this voyeuristic guy, he's just dipping his toe in. He's not really being helpful, even though he appears to be helpful. He's just kind of having fun and playing around. Like we kind of said, like, you know, slum diving a little bit or whatever. You know, he's just kind of like, hey, I'm hanging out with the poor kids. This is cool. Like, their life sucks.
Yeah.
But it's fun. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Doesn't help. You know, like I said, just not as helpful in some situations, like with Mike's brother and stuff, where maybe he could have intervened a little bit. And then once he's done, he's done. Once he's checked out, he's checked out. He's like, yeah, I'm not gonna go back over there. You're on your own, kid. Here's some money. Bye.
Right.
I feel like those are antagonistically things. And if you kind of even like, I don't know if it's too much to put capitalism, the theme of capitalism onto him a little bit. You know what I mean? Because, you know, he does represent money to everybody around him, to Bob, to, you know, I'm sure to Mike. You know, where it's just like, we're not helping the little guy. We like, we'll pretend to for a little bit, but we're not really doing it.
I mean, that's a really interesting thing. I didn't even think about that. You know, thinking about like modern corporations where they kind of hop on this, you know, the bandwagon of being an ally.
Right.
But ultimately, it's very much just a business decision. You know, it's all very, oh, well, I'll put a rainbow on this, or I'll do pride on this, or whatever. But ultimately, they're just trying to get your money.
Right.
And in the end, they're still going to support whoever they need to support to continue getting more money.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, that's an interesting point. Now, granted, that probably wasn't a thing in 1991. But
well,
from
capitalism was.
No, but I'm talking about what I was, my situation that I was just talking about. But it's funny.
It's universal.
But it's universal. It kind of shows a universality that is kind of interesting. Yeah. So I didn't think about that, but yeah.
So through those glasses, I feel like Scott is an antagonist to me, and I feel like he's masquerading as a good person.
Yeah.
But it's all a game, and I think I dislike that more.
No, I don't think you're wrong. The funny thing is, you know, we were kind of talking about it as I was kind of thinking Scott was a glass half full. And you were seeing him as a glass half empty. But I think in the end, I'm going to follow exactly where you fell, where he is the antagonist of this movie in a lot of ways. I think you're absolutely right when we talk about kind of capitalism, class structure, things like that in this situation. You know, having him be able to
jump
be free
classes.
and to be free because he knows that safety net exists.
Sure.
And you know, and I think it's such a small moment, but after in that great scene, after they steal the money, and you know he's got the money in his hand or whatever, and he is like he's going to give it to Bob, but then he only gives him like a $20 bill and keeps like the rest for himself, knowing that he can go and get money whenever he needs it.
Yeah,
you know what I mean, and like only giving Bob $20. I think that goes to show his mindset and almost like a level of greed that it's interesting.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He almost comes off as like kind of that princely kind of guy. You know what I mean? Where it's just like mine.
Robs from the rich and keeps it himself.
Right, exactly. But so no, I think, you know, even though I do think that there is maybe perhaps more altruism deep down than maybe what you see, I agree that he is definitely still the antagonist of this movie.
I like that we found a question. That was good.
Yeah, no, it's not very often. It just comes naturally during the conversation. But the big
usually
question,
we have one. But
we have one.
When we don't have one. We don't have one. Yeah.
Exactly. But we always have one.
Yeah.
And now it's time for that one.
The big one.
The biggest question, which is why we are here on Say Hello to My Little Film, and that is to find out if Ray, did you like My Own Private Idaho, and would you recommend it?
Ooh. Well, I've been really good this year.
You have.
You've tested my boundaries a lot.
And I guess I did. I feel like maybe I did a little bit more during this conversation. I feel like I may have tested it more in this movie than I thought I was going to.
You might have, because overall, I think other than Scott, I don't think I really loved this movie that much, unfortunately. Wow. But I found Scott to be super interesting, but I don't know if I found the rest of them because
Scott or Mike?
Scott, I enjoyed.
Scott, you didn't
Mike,
like Mike.
I thought
Oh, wow.
River Phoenix was great,
Uh-huh.
but I don't feel like I ever was really like invested into Mike because
Interesting. Okay.
in some ways it didn't feel like it was going anywhere for me. And it's like you kind of nailed it earlier when you kind of you told the audience what I like.
Right.
When you were talking about how this isn't that normal Hollywood movie. So
Right.
I feel like this is more about me than anything. But like I do love a good resolution. And like when a character like Mike is stuck in this cycle of like trapped in this life cycle, it is really real. And I don't always want to see real in my movies. I want to see Mike get a win.
For Mr. Doc Watcher over here.
I know, and
I don't
sometimes
always like real in my reel.
And sometimes what I hate about docs is like you watch so many crime docs out there and they don't end with we still don't know who did it, but it'll be cool if we do.
Really
and I'm
cool
like God, I hate that. I like that. Now I don't like this doc anymore. I liked it all the way up to this point.
Yeah.
And I feel like I'm like, to me it's like I really want, like, the movie could have been so many things for me where I'm like, I'm on board with this, and then it does kind of change. Like you said, like the Shakespearean stuff was really interesting, and then it seems like they leave it when they go on the road trip.
Right.
And they're like, well, the road trip can be interesting too, like if they get that resolution with his mom, but then they don't. And I even kind of felt like that, the scene between Mike and Scott at the fire, it's great.
Oh,
it's probably
great.
the best scene
So
of the movie, and that's like a realism that I love, where it's like, you put your heart out there, but the person doesn't return it.
Mm-hmm.
And I could have felt like the whole movie could have been more about that relationship, or and it really kind of wasn't either. Like, I know, like, I don't know, maybe I feel shallow for saying this, but I have to be honest. Whereas, like, where I just feel like maybe a little bit more traditional Hollywood, I would have got 100% on board. I did not hate the movie by any stretch. This is not like a Pink Flamingo situation for me. Like I said, I really love the Scott character, and I like Bob, and so maybe that's why we got a little disappointed when the Shakespearean stuff drifted just a hair away. Comes back and stuff, but but yeah, I think with like Mike, even though like River Phoenix like acts his balls off, I just would have loved more resolution and stuff there. And it's not fair to Gus Van Sant. I think he did his thing here, and I think he got the movie he wanted. It's just not 100% for me.
Got it. Well, it's funny. I just found this quote from Roger Ebert that you might appreciate. It says, "The achievement of this," he loved it. He loved it. But
thanks, Roger.
But what he said was, "The achievement of this film is that it wants to evoke the state of drifting need, and it does. There is no mechanical plot that has to grind to a Hollywood conclusion, and no contrived test for the heroes to pass."
Right.
And I think that, and you're right, like that. That's not an excuse to have a movie with no story. So for me, I have to say that. So I agree with you in that regard. Like, but I think when it works, it works. And for this movie, it does work for me. Yeah. I love this movie. That's why I recommended it.
I love the way you talked about it.
And it is. Honestly. It's a great movie. And I think River Phoenix's performance is just, like you said, it's absolutely insane. He acts with his whole body.
Yeah.
Like the whole movie, like it's like this whole character is created from the ground up, from the bottoms of his feet to the top of his head.
His narcolepsy looks so painful, and I almost had to look up. I'm like, is this what narcolepsy is really like?
Right.
Or is
you don't
it
just fall asleep peacefully?
Yeah, you just laying there. I'm like, because I always thought narcolepsy sounded great. Yeah, it does. It does look like he's convulsing.
In class. Yeah. Come on. Yeah, but and I think that the interpersonal relationships between Mike and Scott, are interesting, and like you said, it is almost like a Rorschach test where you can kind of decide which part of Scott you see. Do you see more of a repressed guy who is unwilling to accept the fact that he is gay, so he has to go back to living this straight life because he knows that there's money waiting for him and power and all of that, or does he want that? And he's just, like you said, kind of slumming it.
He's gay for pay, and he's just totally doing an impersonation of a local.
So I think because of that stuff, I think that kind of, again, is a testament to this movie, because I do like movies that are like that.
Sure.
You know what I mean? I don't necessarily have to have that, hard choice that has to be made, and that resolution to exist. But obviously it has to work, and for this movie, I think it absolutely does.
All right, Rob, well, you and I have just got done watching My Own Private Idaho. We did that together, but I know you've been watching some things on your own. What have you been checking out lately?
Absolutely. I've actually checked out quite a few things. So the first one I'll talk about is Good Omens Season 3.
You did get to that.
I did. Well, and it's a movie. Like, essentially just a one episode, hour and like hour and a half,
Okay.
hour 40.
Because it's been a minute
movie.
since season 2.
Well, because they almost didn't do anything at all because
Wasn't
of all
that-
the stuff with Neil Gaiman. Like,
Mm.
so he had those allegations
Yeah.
against him. So they had like canceled the show, and then I guess I have a feeling this was a David Tennant, or Michael Sheen kind of situation where they were able to kind of force them to do something to finish it. Is my guess. But I will say it's. I liked the first season. I loved the second season. This last episode season, quote unquote, was fine.
Yeah.
Like it felt very much like we needed an end. This works as an end. It's funny. Like I've seen some people talk about how like the last scene is really good, but everything that led up to that last scene didn't like build to that, didn't
Yeah.
earn that ending. But like for if you're a fan of the show and you're a fan of the characters, like I think you will have at least a certain amount of joy in how it ended, because you just put so much time and effort into them, and Aziraphale and Crowley, like you're just great. You know what I mean? They're
Yeah.
such great characters. So like seeing them where they end up is just, it is worth it, even if the episode itself feels kind of pandering and flat in certain ways. So if you've watched the first two, watch the end. You know, it's not going to blow your socks
You're
off.
committed anyway.
Right, exactly. But you at least get a nice little bow on the end of the series. The next thing that I watched was Should I Marry a Murderer?
No.
This is your vein. This is something out of your vein. This is a crime
That's
doc.
it. I was like, wait, my crime doc antennas are buzzing right now.
It is. It's on Netflix. It's called Should I Marry a Murderer? And it's about a lady in Scotland who is like gets out of a bad relationship. She gets on the dating apps, ends up hooking up with this guy who, like a farmer who like lives out in the boonies, and she ends up like striking up a relationship with him, and like within 3 months they're engaged. And all of her friends around her like, this is moving really fast, like I don't know like if this is okay or blah, blah,
Yeah.
but she's like just so insanely happy because of, you know, whatever, like her
There's
bad
nothing
relationship.
wrong. He's perfect.
Right. And then he proposes and all that, he confesses that like a year or two before he murdered somebody or killed somebody.
That's just a little thing.
Right. And then buried the body on the farm.
Oh, that's a little extra. That's a little
So
extra.
it's like the whole thing is like, what does she do after that, and the aftermath of his confession and all of that. And in all honesty, I think the most interesting thing about the show, besides just the psychology of it from her angle, you know, like falling in love with this guy and like then having this like kind of come out of nowhere, is how the system kind of fails her.
Shocker.
And like that's kind of really where I think a lot of
Yeah.
the meat of this doc is how the Scottish like legal system really failed this lady and put her in really bad situations. And then in the end they almost kind of blame her for it, and you're like, this is all your fault, not her fault. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah. Accountability stuff.
Yeah, but knowing your love of crime docs, it's 3 episodes. It's
Yeah.
super.
It's
super
on my
fast.
it's on my queue. It's on my
Yeah,
list.
You should totally check it out. I think you would dig it. Another show that I watched was Kevin. It's the animated
Who?
cat show with Jason Schwartzman. I guess it was created by Aubrey Plaza.
Okay, yeah.
And she's in it. She voices his owner. But Kevin is voiced by Jason Schwartzman. And he plays a cat named Kevin who Aubrey Plaza and her boyfriend split up. And Kevin is so distraught about it that instead of picking an owner to go with, he strikes out on his own and goes and he moves into this cat like animal rescue. And it's kind of almost like it's kind of a take on like one of those like apartment shows. Like, so there's a lot of different characters and stuff like that. A lot of great voice talent in it. But man, the best one, and as you will clearly know when I tell you, is that my favorite thing about the show is that one of the cats is voiced by John Waters.
John Waters.
And it's so good. He plays this very like fancy Persian cat
Sure.
who's super bitchy, and it's just so good. And Whoopi Goldberg is in it as well. Plays kind of this drug addict cat, which named Cupcake, which is she's so good. It might be my favorite Whoopi performance in 30 years. It's so good. But it's such a fun show. Adult, animation, obviously. There's a lot of that out there now.
Sure.
But Kevin's a lot of fun. Like I said, Schwartzman's, perfect for this kind of angle on the cat character, and I think they've kind of come up with something for a second season. I wasn't sure if how they would do a second season, but I think they came up with a good angle. So it's a lot of fun. If you're into that kind of stuff, by all means, definitely check it out. And then 2 movies. I watched The Bride.
The Frankenstein movie.
The Frankenstein
Christian Bale.
movie, right? Christian Bale and Jesse Buckley, directed by Maggie Gyllenhaal. And it got a lot of this movie got a lot of crap. It was really divisive. Like, oh, it's very like a feminist and it's very angry and all of that. And like, I don't necessarily disagree that it has that, but I feel like there's a lot about this movie to actually really like, and I think there's a lot of risks that she took, Maggie Gyllenhaal as a director, that I really appreciated. It's a pretty gonzo movie. The style is very singular, and she really like takes it to a really dark place, which is great. And I think what she did with the Frankenstein, bride characters was really, really good. But there was definitely moments in there where you can tell in this kind of modern world where the male loneliness epidemic, if you will, people would take issue with some of the things that she was doing in the movie. But I think it's better than a lot of people give it credit for. I will say right now, Christian Bale is fantastic. Jesse Buckley is insanely good.
I, weirdly enough, really loved the portrayal of like the bride and Frankenstein in James Gunn's Creature Commandos. Is it like that, or
no? Not necessarily. Yeah. Like she's a little more, because the whole thing is like she doesn't know who she is. Like she's a victim of an accident, murder or whatever, and then Frankenstein finds a doctor who he's a big fan of her work, because this takes place in like the 20s, and he has been around for 100 years and is trying to find a companion, and he really wants a companion, so he has this doctor dig up a lady, and they find the lady who becomes the bride and reanimate her, essentially. So and it kind of goes from there. And there's a certain Bonnie and Clyde element to it, which I think you really do get from the trailer, and it is accurate. Like there is kind of a Bonnie and Clyde element to it, where they kind of just go on like a rampage, if you will. But like I said, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff about the bride character that I think really kind of got overshadowed by some of the, I think, kind of made up controversy of it. Another thing I watched was a movie called Whistle with Daphne Keane, X-23 from Logan.
Yes,
you don't see her very often, and it's on Shudder, because I'm such a big fan of Shudder.
Yes,
great, and it's like it's a fun. Is it like knocking it out of the park? Great, no, but it was a movie about this. I think it's a Aztec death whistle that this like group of teenagers ends up finding. Nick Frost from the Edgar Wright world is in it for a hot minute, and which is great. And then they do a really good job of like cultivating some interesting characters amongst the teenagers and amongst the town. I will say I don't know if they were all executed where they needed to be, but for a movie like this, where it is kind of a low stakes kind of horror vehicle, I think they did a lot of really good things.
Oh, cool.
I think it could be kind of overlooked as like B-movie schlock, but I think it's definitely worth a watch. I think it's it's fun. Maybe not for you.
Okay, well, I won't check it out.
No, because I know your horror.
Shudder's not usually my bag.
Right, horror is not usually your bag. But for all the horror fans in the audience, I actually do recommend Whistle. I think that was actually a pretty good movie. Last but not least, and this was pretty fun because this is talk about low stakes. This is a gardening show.
I watched that.
Did
too.
you? Thank God.
You got me onto it.
I did. I recommended it, but I didn't know if you were going to watch it. Yeah. Zach Galifianakis. This is like 6 episodes? They're like 15-minute episodes.
Real quick.
So it's such a weird show. Like it's just him kind of exploring all of these different elements of gardening, these different types of fruits and vegetables. And he constantly is interviewing kids. Yep. Which is so funny. Like just random kids for whatever reason.
Kids,
But the interactions are so good.
Oh, sure.
There's just like this ephemeral joy that kind of permeates through the whole show that I can't explain. You kind of have to feel it to understand it.
Yeah, and you're going to learn some things that I'm like, I didn't know that about, like apples or corn, what corn originally looked like, and it's you're going to learn some stuff. You're going to laugh.
Yeah.
Zach is maybe the most genuine I've ever seen him. He still can play as
Seriously.
dumb and aloof,
Yeah.
but in a real genuine, heartfelt way.
Agreed. Like there are those moments, especially when he's interacting with the kids, you're like, man, I bet you're a really good dad. Are you a dad? You're like a really good dad.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah,
He
I think he
said
is a
so.
dad. So yeah, he did. You're right. He did say it in the show. But I'm just like, yeah. So that one I highly recommend. You can
Yeah.
finish it in an hour and a half, and
Yeah.
but it's totally worth every minute of it. But that is it for me. But we got to know, Ray. What about you? Have you been checking out anything that I should also be watching?
I've been wrapping up quite a few shows. I did get my doc of the weekend. I watched that the documentary on Netflix about Martin Short.
Oh, I need to
Marty
watch
Life
that.
is Short.
Yeah, Marty
and
Life is Short.
It's just super fun. If you like Martin Short at all,
Yeah, that's what I
it's
figured.
just gonna be like a good, wholesome doc.
It's
Like
sad because Catherine O'Hara's in it. Like
she's
a
in it
lot.
Yeah. They're
Like,
really good
God,
friends. Obviously,
yeah.
they grew up in the whole like Second City
Yes.
and all that stuff back in the day.
Yeah.
And she, she loved. Everybody loves Martin Short. There's not a bad thing to say about
how can you
him.
not?
He just just has fun and he does
Yeah.
things for fun and he's really good behind behind closed doors or in his private life. They have this whole crew with like Catherine O'Hara, Tom Hanks, Steven
Eugene
Spielberg,
Levy.
Eugene Levy, like all
Yeah.
their kids are the same age and
Yeah.
they just all just hung out all the time. And then Martin Short's wife, his wife got real sick and
Yeah.
she passed away, so they can touch into that. And
I have heard, now I don't know if this is accurate, but I think it is, that he and Meryl Streep are actually a thing in real life now.
I
Like after
don't know.
Only Murders in the Building.
Oh, really?
Like they're actually like together now, or like have maybe a situationship,
Yeah.
as the kids call
I'm
it
not sure.
nowadays.
I'm not sure.
But I think that's accurate, which I think is outstanding.
Yeah. And it's funny because I think we love Murders in the Building or loved and we're kind of
Yeah.
like just wrap it up, but he's like he kind of says in the in the doc, he's not talking about like this he's just not talking about like the show being unsuccessful or anything, but just saying like I'm just hanging out with one of my best friends, Steve
Right.
Martin, and it's like, why would I stop? I'm like, well, yeah, to his point of view, like he's having fun, like he's not necessarily trying to
yeah.
create the greatest show in the world.
Yeah.
And it was super great for a while. It's just it's kind of feeling a little played,
Yeah.
but yeah, I get it. He's like, I'm having a blast. Like I'm just hanging out with my friends. Like why would I stop? I'm like,
Yeah, I mean,
don't.
that's fair. I do
Don't.
get that.
You're getting old. Don't. So watch that. That was great. You haven't got to Punisher One Last Kill.
No, I need to. I've been meaning to, but I've been watching other stuff, and I know it's only a one-hour thing, so I just need to watch it.
It's just like 42 minutes. I know some
Yeah.
people are actually complaining it's too short.
Yeah.
I will say, like, it depends what you're going to go in wanting. If you just want to
Sure.
see 42 minutes of the Punisher being the Punisher, you're going to get it.
Oh yeah.
If you want to see a really like a big arc kind of storyline, like really
Yeah.
setting him up for Spider-Man or something, like that's not really what it's there to do.
Yeah.
So I know some people kind of felt a little underwhelmed by it, but I'm like,
He wrote it, right? Berthnall wrote it.
yeah,
Okay.
I think him and one other guy, like, I will say wasn't probably gonna be all that hard to write. Like, so,
It's just a lot
it's
of
pretty
firing the
straightforward.
gun at
Yeah,
people.
it's pretty straightforward. Well, you know what it is? It reminds me. If I was gonna compare it to something, I would compare it to like Judge Dredd, and then what was Judge Dredd? The Carl Urban one.
Dredd?
Dredd,
Yeah,
Dredd.
just
And then
Dredd.
what was that? That was kind of based off of that Asian.
Yep.
The
Raid.
The Raid.
There
Thank
it
you.
is.
It's kind of like a Punisher version of The Raid.
Oh,
so
interesting.
it's fun as heck.
Right, yeah.
It's just
that was
it's,
The Raid, yeah.
yeah.
I love that movie. You've never seen that movie, have you?
no, I've
The Raid
seen
Redemption?
Dredd, but I never went and saw Raid. So.
That put
Uh-oh.
put something in my head. Okay, there we go.
But so go in. I think if you go with the right expectations, you're gonna have fun. It's the Punisher.
Cool.
He's fun. John Berthnall's just great in everything he does, but
Yeah.
a lot of him grunting and yelling and
Right.
shooting people. So what's wrong with that? Kind of the big show I got through was the miniseries Lord of the Flies, which I talked about on
here we're back
last
again.
season.
Back again
One
with
of my
Lord of the
movies,
Flies. You're
so
obsessed, Ray.
say
You're
hello.
Obsessed.
I do love the story, and this was super interesting. The music in this series is great. The use of orchestra and choir, because they kind of play Jack's older boys as a choir.
Oh, interesting.
It's kind of like and I think it's really just to kind of set up how you first see them with these long black robes and stuff. But so the music is super interesting and really well, only like an orchestra can just get that playfulness of
Sure.
kids sometimes.
Yeah.
It's shot amazing. It might be the best shot thing I've seen on Netflix in 10 years. It's just
Wow.
really
That's high
gorgeous.
praise.
It's got a great style to it, vibrant colors. They do this thing with because I saw in the making of doc too. there's these red palm trees like all throughout the show, and I'm like, where could you get palm trees this red? This isn't. Is this real? I've never seen this before, and it really wasn't. It's kind of something when they shoot like in really dark lighting, like the filter like turned the greens red, but they used it as like, no, we're acting like this is, we have red trees here, but it's cool. Just it kind of lets you know where you are in the environment and stuff, and was really excellent. But overall, I think it's great. The kids are awesome. It tells the story, but it almost tells the story like it's so real, and it's like it's stretching it out. You get to know the characters so much longer and so much more in depth that they almost lose that theme that they're supposed to represent. It's Lord of the Flies is kind of like Animal Farm, where every character represents something.
Sure.
But when you spend so much time with the character, you're like, no, that's just Jack, or that's just Ralph, and I think you lose the themes and you lose the meanings. You can find the metaphors in there, but it's not like it's in your face as I think like the condensed movie or book would be. So whatever your preference is, but it's a good watch.
Yeah.
And then the big thing, and I know you've had to watch this, was The Boys finished
Of
up.
course.
The Boys season 5, the final season. I've been on the show from the beginning.
From the beginning, yep.
Huge fan of the series.
Right.
I do think the final season left a little to be desired.
Yeah, I think overall it was kind of like they just needed to end it.
Yeah.
And like they just kind of figured out, okay, this is how we're going to do it. And I think the last episode felt very underwhelming.
Very underwhelming.
Like for where they had kind of gotten to with the whole, like, it wasn't that difficult to kill Homelander in the end. Like, and I think that was kind of the thing where
and they kind of did it
felt
the
very
same way.
Small.
Very
like
small.
Being like in the Oval Office by themselves. Yes, there was like some broadcasts, but it was like, I almost wish they had like done it like in front of a crowd, like he was giving a speech on the White House lawn or something. And like I think
it's kind of like they ran out of money or something.
Yeah,
the budget didn't seem like it was huge.
Yeah, and I don't mind like Homelander dying necessarily, but I will say, part of me wanted him to live. Because I wanted him to live without powers.
Yeah.
Or at the very least, him have killed himself because he couldn't live without
something
powers.
like that. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like and again, this is fan writing, whatever, nitpicking or whatever. But I don't disagree. I do feel like the series kind of ended on a little bit of a whimper instead of a bang.
Yeah, and some of the season was trending well. I thought in the first couple, there's two ways you can end a season, or probably more than two, but like if you look at like Stranger Things, like that show was ramping up. Every episode was getting bigger and bigger and more extreme and crazier, and the budget of that show was probably just through the roof.
Yeah.
Where The Boys wasn't going to do that. The Boys was telling their story of their villain and his, it wasn't about destroying the world it was about like controlling it politically.
Yeah.
Which is way more intimate for a superhero.
Sure.
So, but I still thought the stakes were moving up, and then it kind of just seemed like the stakes, like once Homelander became invincible or was never going to die.
Yeah, got the V1 or whatever.
They got the V1, and this is where it's supposed to be like, all right, this was the worst thing that was ever supposed to happen, and then it doesn't really crank up.
No, it basically just kind of plateaus.
Yeah, so it kind of just feels a little weird, like pacing-wise, I guess, after that point.
Yeah, but Anthony Starr is great as Homelander.
They all are. I mean,
but I have to say, like, even in that last episode, in that scene, while I had like kind of issues
when he gets
with
a little whiny,
yeah, like his turn, like his body language changes. Like, it was a testament to him as an actor. Like, I think he sold that scene for being kind of a whatever scene.
Yeah,
he sold it beautifully.
Yeah,
like I think again, he's. I hope he doesn't get pigeonholed as Homelander forever, but I mean, it's hard to deny that it is one of the great television performances.
Yeah, I think he's an iconic villain. I think he'll fall a little flatter than where he was trajecting after like season 3 or whatever.
That's fair, yeah.
But the show did nail some stuff. I thought the Frenchie stuff was great.
Oh, sure.
I love the deep stuff, like not letting him become redeemable. I thought was great. Like A-Train was redeemed, he's not. I get it. I like it. And then the ocean killing him is great.
All the Gen V stuff was like completely worthless though. Like I just don't even understand why they even like did it. And I liked the show. Like it was great. Gen V, but
they built up some great characters.
But Marie Moreau had nothing to do with the killing of Homelander, and they made it seem like that was going to be such a thing in the Gen V show, and then she was just gone. It makes no sense to me.
They're literally the first scene they're in. Starlight's like, yeah, we don't need you, go away. And
Right.
Like, okay. I was like, what?
But the end of the Gen V was, hey, you want to come
Yeah,
work
right.
with us?
Exactly.
Nope,
So,
nope, you're not.
Yeah, and I do think too, like, I really wanted, if you're going to kill Homelander and Billy Butcher's going to do it, then I really wanted that to hit home. But it's almost been like 5 seasons is so long. You're almost like, wait, what does he hate you for?
Oh,
Like,
sure.
you know what I mean? Like, what is this? And it just, I don't know if it, like, I felt like good for Butcher when he finally got to kill Homelander.
Yeah,
I don't feel like
that's
it brought his soul any peace, and so
No. Which
you
is
know.
why he ultimately had to have his fate as well.
Yes, but yeah, I just don't know if I don't know if that part landed, but overall, it's still a great series. I think they did a great job of adapting, and they really take the book. You know, they really do their own thing from the books.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
so good on them for that. But yeah, glad I checked it out, but did wish that hit a little harder.
Agreed.
All right, guys, we are going to wrap this thing up, and if you somehow fell asleep in the middle of this and you've not subscribed, or reviewed the podcast, go back and do it. We would really
Wake
appreciate it. And if you leave us a 5-star review, we're going to read it live on air someday. So you need to go back and do that. Don't forget, you can also email us at carrayrob at gmail.com, and you can reach out to us on Blue Sky
Absolutely.
at carrayrob.
At Car Ray. They got to know where it's at.
That's where it is.
You can also find us at Car Ray Rob Podcast Network on both Facebook and Instagram. The Insta. We are doing a lot of great stuff on there, so by all means, go and give us a follow there. If there is a comment section on whatever platform you are listening to us on, by all means, let us know what you thought of My Own Private Idaho. Tell Ray how wrong he is.
What do you think about Scott?
What do you think about Scott? Was Scott the antagonist of this movie? We definitely want to hear about that. We will be back next week with a new episode of A Copy of a Copy, where Ray and I are doing something that we have never done before for an episode, and that is to go to an actual movie theater to watch a movie for that specific episode,
Yeah.
and that is by doing the 1987 Masters of the Universe and the new 2026 remake of the same name.
We'll see if the new one has the power.
I hope it does. But and as some may know, Ray and I have very polarized opinions of the original. So
I
this
hate
should be
it, and you like it.
and I liked it. So this is going to be super interesting. And then we will be back in 2 weeks with Ray's episode of Say Hello to My Little Film, where he might have to take revenge on me, because we are 2 months in a row now where I have picked movies that you haven't liked.
Yeah, that might happen.
That might happen, so we're going to have to see. But then we will be back at the end of the month with a brand new Hello Movies, My Old Friend, where Ray and I are going to be revisiting the Charlie Sheen, Lawrence Fishburne prison drama Cadence.
Yes, I love this movie when I was a kid.
I did too, but, we'll have to see if it holds up, and you are not going to want to miss it. But until then, this is Car Ray Rob.
Where I'm Ray.
And I'm Rob. And remember, be defined by the films you love, not the ones you hate.
Hey there, it'll be just a little while till Ray and Rob spit their spittle. Come on, check out of the hospital. So grab some of your best peanut brittle. This will be a darn good transmittal. And say hello to my little film.
All right, everybody, it's going to be my turn in 2 weeks on the next episode of Say Hello to My Little Film to show Rob a movie, and I'm going to pick out for him the 1960 classic Inherit the Wind, starring Spencer Tracy, Frederick March, and Gene Kelly. Some magnificent performances by these three men. Really carry the movie. I think it's going to be a fun movie to talk about. I'm not sure if Rob will love it. Might be a little triggering for him, but we're going to have to find that out. So join us in 2 weeks when me and Rob talk about Inherit the Wind.